the most important day of my life. I wanted to help out the B&B. I did a lot of work over the years, painting, banging nails with a hammer, doing landscaping. As a matter of fact, my first business was in landscaping when I was 13 years old. But it happened to be the day I was painting the trim on the bed and breakfast. It was about 78 degrees, calm as can be, sweet wind. The spring was in full force. And I could hear the birds chirping, and I was just in prayer, painting, thanking the Lord. I was looking back in my mind, you could say, revisiting moments throughout my life that I couldn't explain. And how many opportunities that I had not only to spend time fishing, but incredible adventures. From playing soccer in the national championship to becoming one of the #1 salesmen in the state, to these great people that I used to associate with, having a job that I've always dreamed of having, fishing up in Alaska. I can't tell you how many times I've been on boats in which whales would show up, sea lions, porpoises. I can't count. I used to drop my own crab pots for king crab and have great cookouts on the beach and celebrate. Social. Always wanting to enjoy life. And the travels and the new people that I'd meet and the new challenges, but the great failures as well, because that's part of life. And I remember thanking the Lord. Because he answered that call in Dutch Harbor. And that he protected me from everybody once I called out. And so I had the great escape from Alaska, the great escape from Palm Springs, and then the countless times he protected me in Seattle from an entity that you could barely see, but was making its presence known. And for that moment, I just said thank you. And then everything went silent. And I sat down. And I was looking around, and finally, it felt like he put his hand up. And I was on my back looking up, and I couldn't hear anything. But from my head to my toe, my entire body was changed. I can't describe in words what that was like, because I was healed from my heart out. And I try to make memory of moments in my life up to that point that even could come close, and there's nothing. Well, after this experience of absolute euphoric love, it felt like the Lord had a pint full of his love from heaven, and he put his hand right on me. And he poured it right in my soul. Well, I came out of this. I was looking around and I could see things differently. The colors would come in crisper. And I could hear crickets chirping from at least 100 yards away. I felt like I was the strongest man at that point. And I really don't know how to put in words about the feeling that I felt in my heart. So I walked back into the B&B, and Jolene looked at me and she said, "Oh my goodness, what happened?" And I looked at her and I said, I just experienced something that I have no words to experience. And she said, well, what were you doing? I said, I was thanking God for the gift of life, for all the wonderful things, and all the times He's protected me. And then something happened. And now I'm a different person. She goes, yes, you're a completely different person. What are you going to do? I said, I'm going to grab my Bible. I'm going to go up to the lake because there's this glacier-fed, beautiful lake only 15 minutes away. And I'm going to pray. I'm going to thank you. And so that's just what I did. I drove up to this lake and there wasn't a soul around. It was just mountains filled with beautiful trees. And it was just calm, beautiful lake. And I just said thank you. And after about 15 minutes of reading from the Bible, I headed back towards the B&B because that night Vancouver was playing, I can't remember, I think it was Calgary in the playoffs. It was Stanley Cup time. And I was a hockey fan, so was the owner, Bob. And we were going to watch the hockey game that night. But for some reason, about a mile before the B&B, there was this little restaurant that I thought, well, maybe I'll stop in there for an iced tea. And that's just what I did. And when I walked into this establishment, the waitress met me at the door and she said, well, why don't you stand by at the bar? There's only one other person in here and it's going to take me a while to get things in order. But I'll get you that iced tea right away. So I walked in and I sat down at the bar and I had this iced tea and I'm looking at this guy sitting 3 bar stools down. And I'm talking stressed out. I'm having the greatest moment of my life. The Lord transformed me. And when I'm talking about a transformation, and not just my soul, but my mind and my body. And I'm looking at this gentleman a few stools down from me. And he's about as stressed out as a person that I could ever see in my life. He looked like if I would have reached over and touched him on the shoulder, his skeleton would have jumped right out. But I was inspired to ask him a question. And I said, are you from this city? There's something magical about this place. Can you explain it? And he had his hand down like this, covering his eyes. And he had this black cowboy hat on and a gray silk shirt. And the first words out of his mouth, without looking at me, were these. He said, well, Joe, I don't live here, but I'm here in town on work. At that moment, there was pure silence. I was thinking to myself, how does he know my name? What just happened to me? Who is this guy? The first thoughts from my mind were, oh, they finally found me, those guys from Seattle. They've got unfinished business. They finally know where I'm at. But I tried to play it cool. I asked him another question. And the question was, well, how do you know my name? And he said, well, Joe, why don't you start asking me other questions? Or maybe I'll ask you a few. And this is the first one I have for you. He said, if today happened to be your last day alive, how would you spend it? And he refused to look at me. Had his hat on. And I said, well, first and foremost, I thank God for the gift of life. For everything that He's provided for me. But if today happened to be my last